Previously on Keeping It Real.
You had shared briefly with us about your daughter Jana and how she was, married to someone she was in an abusive marriage, was it?
She was, but she didn't realize that at first. I can remember her saying, "Oh, Mom, he's so sweet. You just don't know the sweet side of him." He started controlling her. Mm-hmm. He started taking her phone away. He started saying, "You don't need anyone else but us, but me. You don't need your parents. You don't need your brothers. You don't need your friend. I love you so much." And we started realizing it. There was a shooting at the local restaurant, and I just knew in my heart it was Jana, because I knew that the restaurant where she worked. He did shoot her in her shoulder, and she would have lived, but everyone fled, and there was no one there to help her. And so her ex-husband followed her and was inside with her after he shot her, and he actually had a knife that we didn't know about. And he stabbed her several times, and he finally cut her throat, and she bled out and died. The grace that God had for us at that moment was the only thing that ever got us through.
Kristen Maddox overcame a 12-year addiction. Now she pulls others out knowing that some have escaped death for the last time. Shauna Butler understands the pain of sexual abuse. Now she uses her voice to unhush the little girls inside of women she counsels. This is Keeping It Real.
Good morning. Welcome to Keeping It Real. Our guests today, Pastors Mark and Nancy Stern, pastor a church in Walker, Louisiana called Oasis Ministries International. And they are here today to share their story about how God brought them through the most painful and traumatic time in their life after losing their daughter, Jana. And as you just saw, we showed a clip of last week's segment, and they're back today to finish sharing how the Lord brought them through. Thank you both for being here today to share your story with the viewers. I know that there are going to be people watching today that may have endured some form of trauma or the loss of a child or a loved one very close to them. And so I just know that God is going to use this to help them. Yeah. Pastor Nancy, you wrote a book called Sufficient Grace, and you share both of y'all's testimony about just how God His grace has been sufficient throughout your life. And you share just a very, very difficult time that you were having one night when you were kind of in a battle in your mind, if you will. And I'm going to read a little bit from your book. It says, "That night I was having trouble sleeping because I was dwelling on the pain that I felt my daughter had suffered. By that time, we knew a little bit more about what happened, and I told God that I just couldn't handle it. I couldn't take the pain these images were imparting to me. Anyone who has children knows that you hurt even when your child stubs his toe. My agony in those moments was unbearable. And God gave you something that just gave you so much peace. Can you share what it was that He said to you?"
I'll be glad to. The images I was talking about at that time, it was before the funeral even. And the images that we had, although we did not physically see Jana after the murder happened, we did see her in a body bag go away from the restaurant. So that was traumatic enough. But you know how the enemy will do with visions, and we knew then what had happened to her. So all I could see when I closed my eyes were those images of what I felt like she looked like. And I think they were pretty accurate. But I knew that I couldn't dwell on that, but my heart was hurting so badly. It was like a piece had been taken off out of my heart. And so I went to God and I said, "God, I can't handle this." And He said to me, "Do you remember having your children?" And at first I thought that was a little strange, you know, and I said, "Yes, I do." And He said, "It was painful." And I said, "Yes, it was." And He said, "But when she saw my face, she forgot her pain." And that just overwhelmed me so much that, you know, I began to understand and to forgive at that point.
Right. I know there's a part in the book where Pastor Mark, where you were dealing with a lot of bitterness, and God got to a point where He asked you a question. Do you remember what that was about being bitter or angry?
Well, you know, at the time of the murder, everything was so surreal, and God's presence was so tangible that we were so aware of his presence, you know. And it was like a father was just actually right there with me, holding me, being with me, going through it. And I was ready to be, you know, angry and bitter and just let it eat me up and tear me down and just ruin the rest of our lives. But God said, you know, because we have choice, he said, well, you can do that. Or he said, I'll take it. You know, the whole anger, the pain, everything. And so I thought about it. I didn't just, you know, you don't just give something like that away. You have to decide.
Right.
It's a decision. And I said, okay, God, you take it. And before that point, I couldn't even lift my head up. But you know, the Bible says he lifts our head.
Yes.
He's the lifter of our heads. After that, and it was the day before the wake, I couldn't even put my head down. Because all the anger, all the burden, all the hatred, it was just gone. He took it. He bore our burdens. He took it.
And you know, I'm thinking about there's another area in the book, and just with you saying about how he took that anger and that hatred away. And I know you talked about at one time how before trial, when your daughter's murderer, the elevator opened and he came out of the elevator, and you were really close to him, and there was nothing in between you.
This close, because we hadn't seen, as our son-in-law, we hadn't seen him for 2 years, except on the TV when they were bringing him, putting him in the jail, and the dog had bit him, and he, you know, I kind of like that part because he had bandages on his arms, but we had not seen them until the trial. And we walked up the stairs, and he and the deputies came up the elevator there in the courthouse in Livingston, and there was no restraints, there was no metal detectors. There was nothing keeping me from, you know, an act of vengeance other than God.
Wow. Wow. Can you tell us if he showed any remorse at all during the trial?
No.
None at all.
None.
And when he saw us, you could just see the evil come over and the meanness. He just looking down and.
Really? I remember at one time you telling us that there was a certain point in the trial where he did pick up his head and show interest. And could you tell our viewers what that was about?
The DA's office told us that they would be showing pictures of the crime scene and our daughter's body, you know, in that state and so forth. So that was when he showed a little interest of the mutilation that he had done to her.
And when the coroner was describing it as well.
Right. Yeah. So they told us ahead of time that we would be able to leave because we didn't want to see at that point, see the pictures. So.
Well, we're going to go to commercial break, but when we get back, I want you to share with our viewers about the letter that he sent you all from jail during the sentencing. We'll return in just a few minutes.
I'm Pastor Philip Pimlott, and this is my wife Kelly, and we want to extend a special invitation for you to come and visit us at Heartsease Family Life Church. Heartsease is a safe place for you and your family, a place where life starts, love happens, and purpose is revealed.
Our church is located at 12112 Florida Boulevard, and our services are Sunday mornings at 9 and 11 and Wednesday evenings at 6:45.
For more information, check out our website, hflc.us. Welcome home.
Evans, and I'm the proud owner of Tamara Cleans, a locally owned and operated residential and commercial cleaning company, where we specialize in custom cleans for your home or office. We cover Ascension, East Baton Rouge, and Livingston Parish. Call for your free quote today, and always remember, don't stress, let Tamara clean the mess.
Thank you for tuning back in to Keeping It Real. We're here with Pastors Mark and Nancy Stern, and when we went to commercial break, we were talking to them about the sentencing of their daughter's murder, which was their son-in-law. And I was actually asking a question about, I know at one point, the man that murdered your daughter actually sent you all a letter during sentencing or right before that. Can you share with us what happened with that?
Sure. In Louisiana, there's the trial phase, and then there's the sentencing phase. So the trial was over with. The DA had opted for second degree with no parole, life in sentence, hard labor. I like that part.
No probation.
And no probation. And so because with first degree, which definitely was a premeditated first degree death penalty occurrence. But because of the time frame, it takes 10 years to get this over. They didn't want us to go through that ordeal. So after the trial, then during the sentencing phase, the convict is allowed to write a letter. And so actually we received two letters, one in pink ink, obviously from somebody helping coach him to how to be sweet, what to say, oh, I love you, and you're my family, I just want to be part of your family, and that.
Wow.
And then another one in black ink in his handwriting, but we got both copies.
Yeah.
But that didn't, the trial was over. We didn't even show up for the trial, for the sentencing, because see, we were finished. We were in the process of forgiving, and forgiveness is a process. Now we can forgive. I know we're going to discuss this a little bit further on, but it is a process. So.
I know with that letter reaching y'all, and I'm sure he wanted y'all to go and maybe stand and
Be lenient.
Yeah, for him. There was another letter that was sent to you all after that letter, after the sentencing.
After we didn't show up for his sentencing and he knew that we were done with that, we were finished, he wrote a letter to me, addressed to me, and when I opened it, it was dated the day that he killed Jana, the time that he killed Jana, and some things that happened, and he actually was raping me in the letter. And Pastor Mark was looking over my shoulder as I read it, and he grabbed it out of my hand and he said, "You're not gonna read that." And it's some things that I guess I've led a sheltered life, but things I didn't even know what he was talking about. So we immediately turned that over to the DA's office, and they did restrict his writing privileges.
Right.
Which that just goes to show you the type of manipulation that you were dealing with here.
And no remorse.
That there was no remorse. And so, again, talking about forgiveness being a decision and being a choice, there were many times over, that you had to make that choice. I mean, it wasn't just one time, right?
Exactly.
It's ongoing, but you have to realize the penalty to us if we don't forgive. I mean, Jesus plainly says is if you don't forgive, then he can't forgive. So what is it worth?
I remember off camera, you and we were talking, and I think I asked you the question: would you have wanted him to get the death penalty, or just remain life in prison? And you mentioned something about Jana. What Jana would have wanted?
We did not want him to get the death penalty because Jana, our daughter, as well as we, are loving people, and if he has a chance at all to become saved, become born again, then we would like him to have that chance, and so would she.
Wow. Talk about forgiveness. I mean, that has to truly come from a deep, deep place. Just thinking about how manipulative he was with the letter, at first being really sweet and wanting y'all to come and stand and talk for him, and then sending the letter after he realized y'all did not come, about how he was going to, do those horrible things to you. It just shows how abusers, if we believe them when they're in their sweet mode,
right,
that we could be tricked very easily. And so, what would either one of you say to a woman out there, a young girl that has been in an abusive relationship, and right now she's out of it. Maybe she's at her mom's house now because she's left that abusive relationship, but she's getting these phone calls from her abuser that's saying, give me one more chance. You know, what would you say to her?
I remember my daughter telling me, Mom, he's so sweet, and he loves me, and I love him. But then she began to understand that he was taking her phone away, telling her to not that she didn't need anyone at all. She didn't need friends. She didn't need phone numbers. She didn't need us for sure. She didn't need her family because he loved her so much that that was all she needed, and she would be complete with him. But then he began to be abusive more than controlling. So I think we have told this to women and girls and even men throughout the countries that we visited. Get away from them as fast as you can. They do not love you. They love themselves. They do not have a relationship with you. They love themselves, number one. They want to control, and they want to continue controlling. Now, if you are away from them, we ask our daughter through counsel to get a restraining order. But one of the things that the clerk of court told me is that a restraining order does not stop a bullet. So it didn't in Jana's case. So you have to be very careful with them. But as soon as you know it, you're not going to change them. She thought that she could change him, and it didn't happen. And he kind of had multiple personalities, I believe. He could be sweet. But then more than that, he was manipulative, and he was controlling. And that's not love.
One thing that I've been really wanting to ask you both, and have been waiting for this question for so long, is how this affected your marriage. But we're going to go to break, so when we come back, I'd like to hear how this affected your marriage and how you were able to help one another get through this when we come back. Today, girls will die as a result of abuse that went too far, drug overdose, and even suicide. It doesn't have to end like that. There is hope. Hi, I'm Kristen Maddox, founder of A Door of Hope Ministries. A Door of Hope provides free services to girls and women that are stuck in a vicious cycle. Some have escaped death for the last time. Without a place to go, they will return to the streets, their abuser, jail, or even worse, end up dead. Let's rescue them by providing a home where they can come free of charge to receive the healing they need. There's a cry in their souls for freedom. We're responding to their cries. The question is, will you help us? Visit our website at www.adoorofhopela.com or call 225-665-HOPE. Together, we can make the difference between life and death. Welcome back to Keeping It Real. We have Pastors Mark and Nancy Stern here today, and we were just talking about how this affected your marriage. How were you able to get through this together, obviously together?
You know, statistics do say that a lot of marriages go on the rocks, or people get divorces after their children die. Fortunately, we have been married, 32 years when this happened. So we did already have a strong marriage. But still, we had to really be careful and watch. We would get maybe arguing a little bit, because we were tense and, and hurting so much. I think that strife would happen easier. We had to really be on guard for that.
I'm sorry. I was just going to ask, what do you do when one person is trying to grip onto joy and hold on to it, trying to get over it, and the other person is still grieving?
Can you give them that little illustration?
Well, many times a couple, one will be down, like you say, the other's up. So the one that's up, it's their job to help to pull them up. And then when the reverse happens, then that person needs to pull the other one up. It's a teamwork. It's a partnership. It's like a triangle. If you have a triangle and God is the top and you're the two corners, right? And it has to be 180 degrees if you're a math person. So the closer you are vertically to God, okay, the closer you are at the bottom to each other. So if your vertical alignment is strong, then the bottom two will be close. But if one or both of them are not so close to God, if the angle is out, then correspondingly the other angles are going to be stretched. So when one person is close, then it's their job to pull the other one in.
Right.
And that's a responsibility. And as Pastor Nancy was saying, we knew that other couples, you lose a child, you lose a loved one, it's a very traumatic thing. It's not something you plan on. It's not something you have contingency plans, say, okay, if this happens, I'll do this. This is just something you just got to roll with it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we knew that there would be stress. We knew that there would be tension. There would be struggles. And so we were a little bit prepared. So we're just saying now, if someone goes through this, then you need to pull your partner in.
The other thing
That's your
too,
partner.
another thing too is the Lord taught us early on that we came together as a marriage, as a couple, before our children got here. So He shared with us that we are important as a couple. We became one. Not to say that our children were not important, but to say that we came first in the marriage and the children came second. So we had that relationship of building each other up too, putting Him first, or putting God first, of course, and then putting my husband first. Mark has always been the head of our household, and we want it that way. That's the scriptural way. So to honor Him and for Him to love me, we did that as well.
Wow.
That's so
That's a
good.
blessing. I know you all have, Miss Nancy wrote a book called Sufficient Grace. And oh my goodness, I mean, you have to get this book. This book is the healing that takes place, in this book. What got you to the point of being able to write this book?
My first copy of the book was 1 page. I had to get my thoughts down about, and I felt like the Lord was leading me to write a book, but I'd never written a book before, so I didn't really know what I was doing. I brought the page to Pastor Mark, and he said, well, don't you think you need to make it a little more descriptive? So I began to pray about it and then start reading, but I think the reason we named it Sufficient Grace is because when Jana was about 2, a pastor came up to us and gave us a word of knowledge, and he said, I have a word for you. And we were so excited. And he said, because we were in our 20s then, and he said, God said, my grace is sufficient. And we were like, oh, thanks. I mean, we know that my grace is sufficient. And he said, no, one day you're going to need my grace, that word, my grace is sufficient. And we just kind of put it on the shelf, and, but whenever I began to write this book, God said, my grace is sufficient. And He totally showed it through us, throughout our life.
Isn't that something how God gives us a nugget years back, and then He reminds us of that one word? Were you going to say something?
Yeah, I wanted to say that to that person is still struggling with a loss of a loved one. There's no time period, but there is a point where you need to go ahead and move on. You need to realize this tragedy has happened. You need to realize that God's still on the throne, and there was a purpose. It may not be in our universe of thought, but it is something that happened. We don't like it. We have to move on. We have to forgive whatever happened. If it was someone did, in our case, our daughter was murdered, we have to forgive him. I don't have to like it. I don't like it. But I have to forgive him for my soul's benefit. It's a process, and it's a continual thing of forgiveness.
Do you find that you cherish moments a whole lot more with your other children?
We try to. Yeah, life really became real. The little things don't bother us as much, don't worry about it.
And then, it's a me generation. You think about me, myself, and I. And I remember going by a cemetery one day, and, you can look at people and you don't know what they're going through. Because I remember in stores and things, I would think, my daughter just died, but no one knew that. And then I remember going through cemeteries, and the Lord told me, all of these people died, and they were all important. You're not the only one going through this, And so that kind of brought a little reality to me as well.
It does. It changes your perspective and your perception about things. How has it changed others' lives since you've written the book and been going just all over the world to share your testimony?
We've had so many testimonies. We've had people that have left their mates or other significant others that were beating them or abusing them. We've had people come back to the Lord and in unforgiveness, and they begin to forgive people, and you can just see a total transformation on their faces.
Can you share the story? I don't know if it was in your book or if maybe you shared it about the gentleman that was sitting in the audience when you shared.
That was in South Africa at Lofdale, Dr. Gustav de Toys. He asked us to come over and share a story, and this elderly gentleman came up, and he said, he told Pastor Gustav, and he told us later, he said for 20 years, someone had murdered his son, and he didn't believe the guy. He believed it was murder. And he came to us and he said, if you can do this, and I can see the glory and the grace that God has brought you, then I have no right to hold on to that. And he asked forgiveness, and it totally changed him. People with bitterness, their bodies have been racked with all kind of disease because they've had bitterness, and they've let go of that, and they've been healed, been able to be healed. The minds have been healed. It's just been awesome.
That's a blessing.
Because of our little girl.
Well, we just want to thank you, Pastors Mark and Nancy Stern, for sharing your story with our viewers. And here on Keeping It Real, we have real lives, real stories right here on Keeping It Real.
Do you have a story? Send your personal story to info@adoreofhopela.com for a chance to be selected as a guest on the morning talk show, Keeping It Real. Today's episode's closed caption sponsor is Tamara Cleans. Always remember, don't stress, let Tamara clean the mess.